All right, we're back. Season 5. I still cannot believe that. We started last week with Tim Glover, our sales manager here at Gill, the javelin thrower extraordinaire. And now we're going to go into, I alluded to this last week. I wanted to have some fun. Like, we have a pretty close connection with the great university, Baylor University. Our CEO went to school there, and then like every one of his children. So we get to go visit a lot, and hoping to get down. Actually, this year they're hosting Big 12s on a brand new resurfaced track there as well. And so we're going to do, it's Baylor. So I automatically think of, quarter mile university, 4x4 university. So we're going to do a special 4x4 with Baylor here for the next 4 weeks. You've already seen the guest today. I'm not going to give out who necessarily the guests are the next 3, but trust me, you'll appreciate them. They're all very, very awesome. They're big bears, as we might say here. So let's get into it with the leadoff. And this is very appropriate because this was the leadoff guy for Baylor for many, many years. Help me welcome the head coach of Baylor University, the wise, the wonderful Mr. Mike Ford. Mike, how are you today, sir?
I'm doing great. The funny, great day in Waco, Texas. It's actually not hot today, so it's been good, and we've been getting a lot of rain the last 2 days. So the Lord has blessed us with some good rain. The field looks really good, and yeah, my car doesn't like it because I keep washing it every other day. But things are good.
What's not hot in Waco? Because I've been there when it's been some blazing times there now. What is considered not hot?
Well, right now it's if I look out the window at the track, it's about 70, actually 75 right now.
Yeah,
So I'll
okay.
probably maybe get up to about 80 today, but just a little overcast today. But we've had a really mild fall so far.
Mhm.
So that means we'll probably get a crazy winter. But
Yeah.
yeah, but looking forward to it. But we didn't have a lot of rain in the summer. So I think we went maybe like 60, 70 days without rain. So now
Wow.
we're hitting it pretty hard right now.
Well, there is a lot to talk about. You have a long history with Baylor, so there's a lot to talk about with the new track, the new facility that came in several years ago now, and now being resurfaced for Big 12 championships coming up that you're hosting this year. I think you hosted the year the track was built, because I think I remember coming down for that meet, if I remember correctly. I think it was
I think
that year
so.
or the year
Yeah.
after. Yeah, it was brand new. I remember at that time. But let's get into you, Mike. You know, when we think about coaching, at some point coaching had to change in your mind. It's usually not a light switch, it's kind of a fader, right? Where
Hmm.
coaching is done to you, might go run this, go throw that, lift this, and there's an idea of like, oh, well, wait a minute, maybe I could be a coach. Maybe that could actually be my profession. Let's talk.
Right.
Let's talk about your origin story. Where does track and the track coaches start for you?
Well, honestly, I was that switch where I didn't want to coach. I never thought about it. Wasn't in, at least in my plans. I think it was in more in God's plans than anything. I had a plan of I was going to go to college, get a degree in business, and try to work as either maybe a sports agent or something in marketing, and or in sales, and ended up coming to Baylor. Did that part. Track got me here and graduated from our business school, and then actually worked at a law firm in Rochester, New York for 3 years. Um, but I was still training a little bit, and Tim Hale, who was at the University of Rochester, literally came up to me one day and said, "Hey, I need a sprint coach." And I said, "Who?" I said, "I don't know anybody that can do it." So we were chatting about it, and he said, "I think you'll do a really good job." And I was like, I don't know. So I talked to Cedric Walker, who was my Cedric Walker was my club coach, and I talked to him. I said, "Hey, what do you think?" He said, "Mike, it's only part time." He said, "You only got to show up." He said, "You can keep your full time job, show up in the afternoon." So, anyway, long story short, I took the job, and but I think the blessing was everybody was they were all freshmen. Most of the guys in the sprint group were all freshmen, and so I worked with them. We ended up winning conference, indoor and outdoor as a team, and I was like, man, it was fun. The pay was awful, of course, but I did that, and then I stayed there for 3 years. Coach Hale retired eventually, and then Coach Hart called me, thinking 2001, and said, "Hey, I got a position open at Baylor. You can be my assistant coach." And so I moved to Waco. Never thought I'd move back to Waco, of course. But then a few years later, I Tim, I was in North Carolina at one of the high school national meets, and it was a big rain delay. Had like a 3 hour rain delay, so I said, you know what, I'm gonna go do something. And Coach Hale, he had moved to North Carolina at the time, so I called him up and I said, hey, can I come by and see you? So we sat around. He barbecued, had a couple of cold ones on the back porch. And I said, Coach, I never asked you this question. And he said, what was the question? I said, why did you hire me when I didn't have any experience or anything like that? He said, well, Mike, he said, when you were at Baylor, he said, you came up every summer. He said, you worked at my sports camps. He said, you coached I think there was like 13, 14-year-olds. He said, man, you did an awesome job with those kids. He said, the sports that you didn't know, he said, you made stuff up, but they did it. He said, you encouraged those kids. He said, the coaching part, the X's and O's, he said, that part, you can learn that piece. But he said, you're just a good people's person.
Mm-hmm.
He said, that's why I hired you. He said, I just know that you got a heart of caring for young people. He said, that's why I hired you. So, and then later I realized, people always look at you, what you're doing, and they kind of know, hey, this is where you should be. And I've been doing it ever since.
There's a question I want to ask, but I don't necessarily want to ask it now. So let's put a pin in that when Coach
Okay.
said, help me remember, and I'll try to write a note here too, about not necessarily the X's and O's, but the people part. That's an interesting aspect, because a lot of coaches are searching like madmen and women for the X's and O's part about it. And certainly that's important. You got to coach.
Right.
But I'm very keen in having a conversation about what the people part is. Let's make sure we touch back on that. But let's talk about, it's interesting. You went to Baylor twice.
Right.
How does, you're a New Yorker. I think of you as a Texan because I just know you from Baylor.
Right.
And Baylor has done an amazing job with Texas kids. But you actually are a New Yorker. So how does so talk to us. Are you from Brooklyn?
No, I'm actually from Rochester. I'm from
You are
upstate
from
New York.
Rochester. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I couldn't remember where. Rochester, I went there for the very first time fall of 19, right before COVID, to do a site visit for the Division III championships.
Okay.
And, I travel all around this country. Not much impresses me, not because I'm a snooty guy, but, just everything's kind of the same everywhere, but Rochester, that was a cool place, man. I
Yeah.
really dug Rochester, the dinosaur barbecue place,
Yeah. Yeah. Downtown.
the Toy Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
It was a cool place. So you grew up there, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. I was born in Binghamton, New York, and then we moved to Rochester probably when I was, I think, like 2 or 3 years old. So yeah. So I always call Rochester my home.
Yeah. So what was track like for you in high school? You obviously ended up being pretty good because, Baylor doesn't recruit a quarter miler unless they're pretty good. How did you get into track itself versus any other sports? And maybe did you even play some other sports?
Well, I was actually a really big, I I love basketball. Being from New York, you gotta love basketball. So track was definitely not in the cards again. Um, but I my junior no, I'll say my freshman year, after basketball season was over, I was like, I want to try to do something else. So they say my basketball coach, Jeff Slack, he said, hey, why don't you run track? And I was like, I don't know how to run, don't want to run. The only running I like to do was on the court. But he said, you got hops, so we'll have you jump. So I long jumped to triple jump. I think my freshman year I jumped 19.9 and 43 something in triple jump. So Cedric Walker sees me jump at a meet and says, hey, I think you can be really good. And how about you run summer track for us at Flower City? And I was like, I like to play basketball in the summertime. I can be inside, not outside. So, but I ended up doing it. But the crazy thing was Cedric never had me jump ever. He always had me running. And I was basically the alternate. He kept calling me slow. I was an alternate for both relays. But we ended up going to San Antonio for like AAUs or USAJOs, and two people got hurt, of course. Then I had to run on the relays, and I was like, "What? I ain't ran on the relays all summer." So literally, I go out there and I split 50 point on the 4x4, and I ran a anchor leg on a 4x1. And he says, Mike, you know what you ran? I was like, no. He said 50 point in a quarter. I'm like, is that good? I don't know. And so he said, that's pretty good. So the next year, I ended up doing indoor track. Still jumping though. And I ended up jumping, I think I ended up jumping like 22 feet, 47 feet. And then I started running a little bit, just running on some relays. But then that outdoor season, I ended up running 48 and some change. So then it's like, okay, maybe I might be able to be good at this. And so then my junior year ended up running 47.03, jumped 23.6, 48.5 and triple jump. And then I started getting all the mail coming in. I won AAUs in the 400 in Tallahassee, Florida. And then my senior year, I ran 46.6. And then I get this phone call, but it wasn't from Coach Hart though. It was from Michael Johnson. And so Michael called me. I think he had just finished up at Baylor, and he was basically a volunteer coach at the time. And he called me and said that Coach Hart was interested in me. One of my good friends ran for Coach Hart on one of the under 20 teams, and I came down to Baylor for a visit.
Did you did you know who Michael was when he called, or was it just like, all right, some guy's calling from Baylor?
Actually, I did. Once I started, by my junior year, I started following track
Okay.
a little bit more.
Mhm.
And I remember Michael, I believe he won world champs, and I think it was in Zurich in the 200. I think it was in the 200. And I literally had I had a poster on my wall.
That's cool.
Yeah. And so when he called, I was just like, oh, Michael Johnson. But I didn't realize he had went to Baylor though.
Mm.
And so then I started doing a little bit more research. Back then, of course, we didn't have much internet access, so I looked at a lot of times in track and field news
Mhm.
and read that. And we kind of, with Cedric's help, of course, we sat down and we said, "Hey, let's look at schools that are really good in the 400." And we're gonna. He told me to pick three schools that ran well in the 400 and a 4x4, and he said, "Take one visit just because you want to take it." And then he said, and then take another one for academics.
Oh, cool.
And so we had the five, and Baylor. I think Baylor might have been my third visit. Honestly, it's probably my worst visit of all of them. So yeah, just because it was, when I think of Texas, I think of it being hot. It was in the fall, but it was raining, cold, wet. I love basketball. They had a basketball game, but it got canceled because they had a gas leak at the Farrell Center. Um, and my host didn't want to. Tony Miller, who coaches at Purdue, he was my host, but he had some um, he had a family issue, so he left. So they put me with somebody else. They didn't want to go out or anything, so I flew back home, told my mom how my visit went, and she was like, "Well, we're not going to go to Baylor then, huh?" And I was like,
Let's
"No."
scratch it off the list.
Yeah, she scratched it off the list exactly. But I told her, I said, "I think I'm gonna go there," and she said, "Why is that?" And I said, "The things that are important to me were Baylor checked all the boxes on that stuff." And so I said the track part. I knew Coach Hart's legacy at that time, and it was just really starting at that time. But I knew about Coach Hart. I knew, of course, about Michael Johnson. Deion Miner was a freshman that year. My senior year, his freshman year, and I knew a couple of the recruits that he was recruiting. But then also, we talked about the business school, of course, and Coach Hart's wife was she was a professor at the business school, and so I knew about the business school, and I knew for me, I needed to go to a smaller school that I was going to get a little bit more attention. So the private school for me was perfect. But the big thing was too, it really was Coach Hart. I mean, he was just awesome. Even even we really didn't talk about track the whole time I was here. We talked about family, we talked about education, we talked about, hey, he said, if you just do what I asked you to do on the track, you'll run fine. But he said, your biggest thing that I want you to do is graduate. And of all the other schools that I went to, none of them really talked about the graduation piece. And then Coach Hart was just trying to make me a better man at the end of the day. And so for me, that was what I needed at that time. And so that's why I chose Baylor.
You're known athletically as more of a quarter miler, but we can't forget you were a good long jumper actually as
Yeah.
well. Did you, when you're thinking about going through high school, especially coming from a basketball background, so to go in to do track and do the long jump, triple jump, like that probably happens every day in every high school all the time, right? Like, hey, basketball guy's good, has some hops, let's try him in the long jump, triple jump, maybe the high jump. Not too, maybe less common would be let's try him in the quarter mile and things like that.
Right.
And you kind of started working your way into it. Did you ever fight the quarter mile? Because I don't want to, because I'm gonna make every long jumper and triple jumper mad right now. Those events are a little easier than the quarter mile. They're all hard. Don't send me
Yeah.
hate tweets about this. I'm saying you are certainly hurting more in the last 100 of a 400 than you are in the
On the
penultimate
runway.
long jump. Exactly. That's what I mean, boys and girls. Don't yell at me. So, did you ever fight the quarter? Did you ever say, hey, you know what? Maybe, maybe if I keep more time on the runway, I'll be even better there.
Maybe the first year, but then when I started having success in the quarter, I was kind of like, hey, I want to be good at everything. But I knew, I think my junior year, I tried to do it at state. I tried to do triple jump and the 400 at state meet, and back then we had 3 rounds in a quarter at the state meet. So you
Wow.
ran two. I think it was two on Friday. The championship was on Saturday, and triple jump was on Saturday. So I think I took one jump to make the final, and then I had to run the semifinal, and then I think I ran the final. Got second in the quarter, but then I had to come do triple jump, and my legs were shot. So I ran through one, and then I was like, you know what, this isn't it. So my senior year, I was like, you know what, I'll do it for the points at our league championships and stuff. But then when I go to state, I want to win because I hadn't won the state championship at that point. I said I'll just go for something I know. I think that year, I think I led the state in the 400, 200, and long jump. But I was like, you know what? We thought about doing the double, but then because of course Michael Johnson was doing the double, so I was like, oh yeah, I can do that. But it was just 3 rounds, and I said I don't know if my body at that time was ready to do basically 6 races in 2 days. But
I
yeah,
know. Yeah. Yeah. Rounds will kill you. I mean, especially quarter rounds. I shouldn't say 100 rounds will kill you too. I mean, that's tough.
yeah,
100 long
yeah,
jump time combo.
yeah.
I know the importance you've expressed of Cedric Walker with you in the quarter and in track in general. Was your high school coach as in the same lock and step in regards to you and your transfer? I don't say transformation, but progression.
Yeah, well, it was weird. So, and there I had two coaches. So I had Coach Jeff Slack was my outdoor coach, and my indoor coach was Gary Herbert. I was probably a lot more closer to Coach Herbert just because of the indoor, because he was probably the first one to see me. And he wasn't the one that said, "Hey, you got to run cross country first to get in shape for indoor." Kind of he let me work with Cedric a little bit in the I guess early fall, and then we started working together. But he would we would maybe jump off box springs into mats for my long jump. In our school at East High it was almost like a circle. So at the bottom of it, you could run I think almost like 280 meters around the school. So he would just put workouts together, and we would run in the hallways at the high school. And then I would transition to Coach Slack, and Coach Slack. He was definitely a football coach that was coaching track, but he let me kind of work with Cedric a little bit, and he helped me with long jump when I was there. But with Cedric, I ran pretty much every day though. I ran with Cedric every day.
That's a fascinating topic right there, Mike. We talk a lot in the coaching circles of on the high school side of the high school coach. I'm going to say versus the club coach.
Mm-hmm.
I don't hear a lot of we're kumbaya working together. I hear a lot of like, oh, those club coaches and oh, those high school coaches. What's even more interesting with you is so you didn't have just a coordination of a high school coach and a club coach. You had two high school coaches, an indoor
Mm-hmm.
coach and an outdoor coach. So a lot of communication has to occur there. And it sounds like it was I don't know. You didn't use the word blessed, but it sounds like it was blessed. Like, yeah. If you need to work with Cedric during this time, or hey, what's Cedric doing? So we don't,
Yeah.
piggyback on that. How critical was having these three gentlemen in lockstep together for you and your advancement?
Oh yeah, no, it was great. I mean, I think the thing, everybody, I think they all put their pride aside, and they was
Mm-hmm.
like, let's see what's the best thing for Mike to do. And so we would come up with a plan. And it was whatever, how Cedric always put it was, whatever your high school coaches do, you make sure you listen to them. And then if you ran, say if I ran 4 200s on a Monday, Cedric would be like, hey, we're just going to do some technique work instead. Or if I did some repeat 400s or something, he would say, hey, we're going to do something shorter. But then too, up there, I think the blessing was too that indoor season, we only had meets on the weekend, but during the outdoor season, we had meets almost we had dual meets. So we would have a dual meet maybe on Monday and Wednesday, and then we have a, a league meet or a big invite on Saturday. And so what we would do is we would come up with a plan because our team was pretty good. I think we in 4 years we only lost two league championships. We had only lost two dual meets ever. So what we would do is we would come up with a plan where like, hey, Mike, today we're going to work on some endurance and speed. So you're going to run 100 and then you're going to run an 800 or something like that. Or we're going to jump. We'll long jump, triple jump at this meet, or you'll run a two. And then at the invite on Saturday, then I would run like my main stuff. And so I was actually doing my workouts in the meets. And so it just worked out really well. We never really I don't think we ever had any conflicts with the coaches going back and forth. They wanted the best for me, and I think everybody was gonna. I always say everybody can eat off the cake. Everybody was eating off the cake, and it worked out well.
Were you the cake in that
Oh
scenario?
yeah, I was
Okay.
definitely the cake. Definitely was a cake.
You
Definitely was
know,
a cake.
there's things you don't think you're going to ever say on a podcast, and
Yeah.
there's one that Mike Ford was the cake. So inquire minds have to be wanting to know, what did you run in the 800?
I ran 155.
Yeah.
I ran 66 11 in the five. I ran 120, I think 124 in the six.
Oh, you guys had all those
Oh yeah,
four,
we had all the
five,
high
six.
points.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm shocked
yeah.
no one's done a 7 yet. I'm sure that's
No.
out there somewhere. I swear.
Yeah.
So you talked about how you had your worst visit at Baylor. I know every coach can empathize with that. You can't control the weather. You just like pray, like, okay, we got our big recruiting weekend.
Right.
Please let the weather be good. And it's usually in a football recruiting weekend, or a football game. Please let us win. Or
Yeah.
okay, this guy likes basketball. Cool, we're playing a basketball game. It gets canceled. Give me a break. Those guys, Coach Hart and the staff had to be like, oh yeah, we're not getting any of these kids this weekend. It's just not happening, for crying out loud. But you choose Baylor. Baylor's an interesting school to me. Someone from the outside learning from other Baylor alums. It's a small school. I hate to say religious school, but Christian school, Baptist school, middle of nowhere. I mean, Waco is there's Dallas and Austin, and somewhere in between there, Waco.
Yeah.
Beautiful campus. Now, I do love the campus. Excuse me, but far away from home for you too.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
did that all play into still choosing Baylor?
Well, I always had this thing where um, a lot of my friends at that time, when they went to college, they went close. So they stayed either in New York, they went, to Pennsylvania area, maybe Ohio, maybe that might have been the farthest, but they all came home for some reason. And so I said, if I go to Texas, I'm gonna stay in Texas. If I don't finish up school, I'm just gonna stay in Texas. I said, if someone gave me an opportunity to get a free education, do something I love, which is, at the time I still love track, um, then why wouldn't I take advantage of that opportunity? And all I had to do was go to school and run track, and that was it. So for me, with the distance, made me focus on not going home. Um, and so for me, it was just trying to make sure I locked in because, like I said, Coach Hart gave me an opportunity, offered me a scholarship to come here. And so, I mean, I went home on the holidays, but it made me, when I got homesick, of course, I would call call my mom. But I think just the distance made me actually grow up a lot faster too. I think if I was a little closer home, then I would probably have been going home a lot more. And I don't know if that would have been a good thing for me.
Yeah, I think there's a lesson there. Yeah, I'm always worried about kids who, high school in the same place, college in the same place. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
there may be a job opportunity that's on the West Coast, thousands of miles away from. Are you
Yeah.
not going to take that job? You don't know if your future spouse is over there, but you're going to
Right.
stay here. It's just always a concern. And I also have, I have a lot of empathy for people who do want to stay, the quote unquote homebodies that want to stay. I moved around my entire life, so it's very easy for me to move as well. And I understand it's not easy for everybody, but I do worry sometimes when people won't at least take a stab. I've never seen anybody go far away from the hometown and not gain some kind of something valuable. Even if they come back home and make a career
Right.
in a family there, there's always something about experience in other cultures, other people, other climates, other accents, etc. I think there's benefit to it. So that's cool. I love that you did that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Were you the outside?
No.
You're a New Yorker. Were you the outsider down in Waco,
Oh
Texas?
yeah. Like Coach,
I just thought about that.
I think for the first 2 years he thought I was from Syracuse. I mean, that's what he's like Mike Ford from Syracuse to New York. So, yeah, I don't think we had anyone. I'm trying to think. Yeah, my roommate was from Austin. My other roommate was from the Garland area. Dion was from Paris, Texas. Tony Miller was from Mount Pleasant, Texas. So yeah, most of everybody else was from Texas.
So tell me about the years at Baylor. You guys were cranking. I mean, this was at this point, it's probably going to have another peak coming here, but this was the peak of 4x4 university. As you talked about, Mike Johnson kind of kicked it off, but there still wasn't a ton of them. At this
Yeah.
point, you guys have got 400 hurdlers, 800-meter runners, 400 runners, 200-meter runners. 4x4 is just, it's a perennial national champ every year. What role did you play? How do you, here's a better question. How do you, during that time, you had such amazing 400-meter runners. I imagine it had to be, and you correct me where I'm wrong here, it had to be hard even to make the final four to be on that relay, which means practice had to be fairly intense when you got all this group that spans from the 200 to the 800 of just killers in the quarter. How did you, how do you, some people wither under that pressure and other people step up and become a diamond in that pressure. How did you react on a daily basis with those guys?
Yeah, I mean, it was. I mean, I think practice was almost like track meets all the time. I mean, we had probably 8 guys, 8 or 9 guys, and I think even my freshman year, I didn't run quote unquote on the A relay until actually the conference championship. I was on the B relay. Me and my roommates were on the B, um, and somebody got hurt. I think at the conference meet, and it was weird. I My freshman year, they were trying to figure out what I was going to do at the conference meet. Was I going to long jump or was I going to run the 2 and the 4? And literally, I think a couple of days before the meet, Coach Hart, Coach Brabham, they had me on a runway try to long jump again just to get points. And so it didn't work out well. It kind of failed. So they said, "Hey, we'll run you in the 2 and the 4." And I said, "Okay." So I ran the 2 and the 4. I got second. Ended up getting second at the conference meet in the 4, and I think I got maybe fifth or sixth in the 2. But then I had to run the relay. And me and Tony Miller had a bad exchange. We dropped the stick. We ended up getting second. Um, but then outdoor didn't run on the 4. I was alternate on the 4x4. I just ran open races, and then my sophomore year I got hurt, so I redshirted. I redshirted indoor, and I came back outdoor. And I should have redshirted the whole season if I had looked back at it now. And so I was an alternate that whole year, and I was just kind of just training through it. And then my junior year, did well. We went to nationals. I think we got fourth, and then we won outdoor nationals. And then that's kind of where it started at. We our junior year, or at least my junior year, we were undefeated the whole indoor season. But back then, you had to run prelims too at nationals. So we were the number 1 seed, and we just didn't run well. We did enough to win the heat, but it put us in the slow heat. And so Coach Art was pissed at us because we had beat everybody all year. And so we get to the final. He says, "You guys, you got to run a certain time." I think at that time, I think we had to run like 3:06. So we ended up running 3:06. I think 3:06.4 in the slow heat, win it by a bunch. So we're in the back looking at the final, and they're running. We're watching other teams run, and we're like, "Man, it's gonna be kind of close." And sure enough, the top three teams ran like 3:06.1, 3:06.2, 3:06.3. We get fourth. And so we're looking up on the podium. We're like, man, we beat these guys like 2 weeks ago. So it kind of just gave us a little more fire. We went undefeated outdoor, broke the school record, at a meet before Texas relays. And then we won Texas relays, won conference, won nationals, broke the school record again at nationals. And then the next year we win it again. It was just, I think we needed something to kind of motivate us. And then that was it. We always just said you can't take any race for granted. And so that's but we were always locked in though. And we never thought about splits. We never thought about splits either. We just thought, hey, how can we be the first team to cross the line? And we always wanted to make sure if my being a first leg, my job was to make sure that I put my group in a good position. But my thinking was I needed to make sure I give it off in first. And then my roommate's job was, hey, I need to make sure if Mike gives it to me in first, I need to give it to whoever's running third leg first. And we just kind of did that way. And we wanted to make sure our anchor leg, who normally is supposed to be the best person, didn't have to work as hard. But we used to run out front. I mean, our school record, when we broke the school record the first time, we won by 8 seconds. And that was our B team. Our B team ran 3:08. Yeah. So we were just locked in. Coach Art just had us, and Coach Art never talked about winning championships or anything like that. He just told us he always wanted us to give good effort. That's all he wanted us to do. So we never thought about winning championships or winning relay championships. He just said, guys, if you do what I ask you to do, if you train hard, and you execute, that was a big thing. Just execute the race and you will be fine. And he just knew. I mean, when you have almost 8 guys that can run 46 or better, I mean, you're gonna run fast. You should run fast.
Yeah, good things typically happen, right?
Yeah.
What years were your undergrad?
So I was there from 93 to 97.
So it was right after you. I have this vivid memory. I was at it was 98 or 99 nationals when it was up in Buffalo.
Yes. I passed out the awards at that meet.
Did you really?
Yeah, for the relay.
So maybe, I know you had to be paying attention. I remember Baylor, and I don't remember who was on the squad necessarily, but Baylor was favored, or at least everybody was going to watch Baylor in the 4x4, and it was in the prelims, and either the second or the third leg, I think it was the second, pulled up like the 200 meter, but hobbled. The hobbles because it was freezing in Buffalo. By the way, freezing. I'm at the finish line. I don't know how I got tickets there, but so they hobble, and you can imagine you're at nationals. First of all, this ain't just any other meet. It's national, so every team is good. Yeah. And this happened at the 200 meter mark, not the 100, not the 200 meter mark. Hobbles in to give the baton, and somehow the next 2 legs make it to where you guys qualify for the finals. And then I think my memory doesn't serve. Oh, my memory just says you did win the finals. I have no clue if that's actually true, but I just remember whoever that was, like what heart to continue, not just give up, and then the heart of the remaining guys to say, okay, well, let's give it a shot to see if we can't make it into the finals. It was amazing.
Yeah, that was Bono Kamani. He pulled
Is that who was that was?
Yeah, yeah. He pulled up at the 200 mark. He caught I think he pulled, or he caught a cramp, and he hobbled in. I was like, man, they might not make it. And then I think Brandon Couts was on that relay. I know Marlon Ramsey was on there. I think he was on the relay. And I think they got the last spot to the final. They didn't win. I think they finished, I don't know, they finished maybe 5th. I think maybe 5th or 6th that year. But I remember because it was, because Coach Smith, who's my associate head coach, she was triple jumping up there. And I remember they called me the week before and they said, "Hey, Mike, how's the weather in Buffalo?" And I was like, "Well, I'm 60 miles away, but I just ran an open meet at Buffalo the week before, and it was like 80 degrees." I said, "Oh, the weather was great," and then all of a sudden you got snow flurries at the national championship, and I was like, "They're not going to bring this back up here ever again."
Ever. I remember sitting at the start finish line, and I can't remember, there was some stud 200-meter runner from Texas. And I mean, as soon, like at 199 meters, and I think it was the prelim, and I literally saw her hamstring wrap up. I mean, it was just, everything was cold,
Oh
flurries.
yeah.
I was like, this is outdoor track. This stinks, man. It stinks.
Yeah, and I was like, "It's right." I was like, "You getting that weather from Canada coming in?" too. So yeah, I felt bad for that one. That was like literally the week before that, weekend before that, it was in the 80s.
Man, timing is everything. So you go through and you finish your career there, Baylor. Why were you, it's interesting, and we don't get into X's and O's necessarily here, but there is an interesting maybe discussion here about, there's a lot of strategy. I love strategy with track and field, because typically we think about strategy for football and basketball, what plays to run, who to guard who, those kind of things. But there is a very deep level of strategy for track, whether it's how you place your athletes for a conference meet to combat other conference meets, in cross country, how you run the race, etc. And in one of the ways of strategy for track and field is relays and your relay order and things like that. And I tend to think that it's more psychological than physical, because it's still 400 meters. I know
Right.
there's a little bit of, maybe one runs a little bit longer, one's a little bit shorter, but ultimately it's still, you got to be a good quarter miler to run every leg. So I think it might be psychological for that person and or that team. Why were you were regarded as the top leadoff leg? Like, it was like, oh man, Mike's best place for us is at the leadoff leg. Why was that? Why you? Why? Yeah.
I think I was just really consistent at it. It was weird. I didn't when I ran the open quarter. I think I put more pressure on myself when I ran the open quarter than on the relay. And the relay, I knew I was three other people were counting on me too. But it was weird. When I ran the relay quarter, I actually had points on the track that I would look at. And I would like, "Hey, I need to make a move here. I need to do this here." And it was like clockwork all the time for me. And so when I got to a certain point, past the 200 mark, I'd be like, "Okay, it's time to go." And every week, and even to this day, I can still see my roommate as I come on the straightaway. His hands would be on his hips, and he'll be waving me in like that. And I think it was just the consistency. And honestly, it didn't matter if we were in lane 9 or lane 1 or whatever. It was kind of, hey, my job is to make sure I pick off staggers, and I started learning the staggers too, and I knew it was always a 3-turn stagger, and so I was learning that, and I was like, okay, you know what? I got a stagger. I already caught this person. I'm running even with this person, so I know when I get on straightaway, I'm gonna be somewhat far ahead of them. And it was just, I just kind of learned that, and then so I think Coach Art just trusted me really well, and then I think if we won, say, 30 races in a row, I think I handed off to my roommate probably 28 of them. So we just had a good connection, me and my roommate, Raul Howard. And then we had Dion Miner was our anchor leg that first year, that junior year. And we just bonded together really well. Like I said before, we never thought about splits. Our main objective was to make sure that we finished first no matter what we did.
It's a unique position. We typically, when I used to coach or teach level ones for USATF, I'd always say, maybe a good leadoff person is like your 400 hurdler, because they're always running in their lane. There is no, cutting into lane one and all that kind of stuff. But that leadoff leg has to be, it's the most similar to the open 400-meter race, because all the other ones, you could have somebody 20 meters ahead of you or 20 meters behind you on second, third, fourth leg. You're not going to have that, hopefully, on the opening leg. So there's just a different mentality that I think has to happen there. Good starter, of course, because you're going to use blocks in that leg, etc. So yeah,
and it's weird, and even with like having a baton in my hand, it made me relax a lot more too. And
Interesting.
so yeah, Yeah, I mean, Coach Art was trying to think. He was like, if you run like this on a relay, we need to maybe put a baton in your hand when you run the open court.
Is that illegal? I wonder if that's illegal.
It's not a rule. You can do it. So
I
he
was about to
used to
say,
actually, he used to get me he would ball up a cup and he would tape a cup up at some meets for me. And just, he said, hey, try it. It was different, but that's what we did. But I just felt more easy with a baton in my hand.
that's interesting. So you go through, you get a degree. Did you get a business degree? Is that what you ended up getting?
So I
Yeah.
graduated from our business school in marketing.
Yeah, great business school there. But that's why when you talked about academics for your visits too, I was like, well, Baylor scratches both that specifically for
Yeah.
business. It's a great business school there. And you're good enough to run post collegiately as well and try to make a stab at that. And gosh, you had a lot of role models in front of you in regards to people that you had run with and that were making Olympic teams and world champs. So there was kind of like, I don't want to say an expectation of like, hey, you need to try the elite level, but there's a little bit of like, hey, this is just what we do here at Baylor. If you're good enough, you try to go on. So where did you try? Did you go back home and train? Did you stay there? How's that?
Yeah. So my last year, I only had an indoor season. I only had an indoor season. So outdoor season, I just trained with Michael Johnson. That was I don't know, I was his trainer. I was his training partner. He wasn't my training partner, but I trained with him. We ran some relays together early or before he went over to Europe. Dion Miner was still training down here too. So it was just us three that we ran. And then I moved back to New York and I was like, you know what? I don't know if I wanted to run professionally or anything. It was just, I still enjoyed running. And then, but I also think at that time too, I think maybe that was the reason why I started coaching because I was actually training myself and I would talk to Cedric about certain workouts. Hey, I think I should do this today. What do you think? And so I think that might have been the start of me learning how to coach because I was trying to coach myself. And I did that for like 2 years, and then one day I was at the track and I was like, you know what, I don't want to do this no more. I don't want to get up and train and work and so I feel for the unattached athletes that work and still compete. Yeah, because it's hard. And you definitely got to be dedicated. And I also thought at that time for me, I thought God had other plans for me, so I was just waiting for those other plans or that other door to open. And so literally, I finished up that last workout, put all my track stuff in a bag, and put it in my mom's attic. So, so and I didn't. It wasn't like, oh, let me think about it a couple of days. It was that day was the day was done. Yeah.
That's interesting. And you're not, we know eventually you start volunteering assistant coaching at Rochester, but there's no place in your brain that's like, I'm going to go be a coach. There's nothing.
No, 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 no. Because I was just like, you when you compete, when I always tell my kids this, when you compete, I'm the only person that I have to worry about when I compete. But as a coach, if I'm coaching 20 people, I'm getting that high, low 20 times. And for me at that time, I was like, oh no, I don't want to deal with that. And and also just trying to because you have the kids that run well and then you have the kids that don't do well. And then you're like, okay, do I comfort the ones who didn't do well? But if I talk to them, then the ones that did do well, they're gonna get upset because I didn't talk to them. And so I didn't want that. And then I was just like, every coach that I knew at that point, they weren't making any money either. So I was like, they're changing lives, of course, but they weren't making any money. And that for me, it was like, I want to make sure I'm at least able to pay some bills, put some money aside for a rainy day, things like that. So the coaching never was a big thing or at all.
We've had this conversation, a football coach, when they win or lose, gets on the bus with a team of people who just won or lost, right? So you have your way of handling whichever way you went, right? A track coach, the ones and the majority of us are coaching men and women. How many times do you go to conference and your men win and your women don't, or vice versa? And then you get on the bus and it's half the women who just had their heart broken by not winning, and then you have half the other side of the bus is all the guys and they are winning. You've got to figure out, to exactly your point, how do you navigate being very happy, excited for the one team and being very broken and empathetic to the other team? We had a high school coach on who both boys and girls had a shot at winning state, and something happened with the boys team, a baton dropped or something, and they lost by the proverbial 1 point, 2 point, and the girls who were supposed to get like third or fourth got first. And he goes, and I get on the bus, and he goes, I couldn't be more happier for my girls. And then my guys are just broken, and I've got to figure out, you got to navigate that. And no other sport, even our tennis coaches in college, there's a men's coach and a women's coach, but that's just crazy that we don't do that for track and field, but whatever. So it's really interesting, unique for track. Something you brought up there, another, not a crusade that I'm on, but you talked about pay for track coaches. And I love how you put that. You're like, hey, we're still changing lives. And that's right. Cause I hear this all the time with, well, we don't do it for the money. And I agree with that. Cause first of all, there's no bigger hype man cheerleader for track and field coaches than this guy right here. Trust me, what you do as a track coach from junior high to summer to professional, the positive impact you make on young people is immeasurable. But you should get paid. I've never heard an accountant say, well, I don't do it for the number. I've never heard a doctor say, well, I don't do it for the money. And those are all people that impact, doctors who and teachers who impacts more people than they do. Right. But you still deserve to make a living. You still deserve to have proper housing, to have a family, to have children, to have passions, to have charities. You deserve that. And we need to pay our track coaches more. It's really weird to be against the person that says, well, I don't do it for the money. But I'll always push back. Like, well, you should. That doesn't mean that doesn't take away what you do for the kids. I'm not saying that does not change at all, but you absolutely should be doing it you should be getting paid what you're worth. Because
because I also think that with our sport, a lot of people always say, well, you guys don't generate money, you don't generate revenue. I'm like, yeah, actually we do. I said, because all the kids that are on your team, a lot of them aren't on full scholarship, so they actually are paying to be at the university. And so we're recruiting walk-on type kids, even some partial scholarship kids, they're still paying. So the money that they're generating, maybe I'll do a study on that to see how much money that kids are generating from your team. How much money is that going into the university?
I bring that up specifically with our mid-major schools, the ones that are mostly concerned about having their sport dropped. And, just this past fall, was it Kentucky Wesleyan, I believe it was, just dropped. And that school's had some major enrollment drops as well. But I always recommend, hey, at the end of the year, I know you're a track coach, but if you're a head coach, you're a CEO, you're running a business, you have expenditures, etc., is to put together a report. It could be as big or as little as you want, but it needs to have on there, well, here's how much we spent on scholarship money, and then here's how much was brought in from tuition, room, and board, because I have a roster of 50, 60, 70, 80 people out there. You need to show the administration, not just your athletic director, by the way, your school's administration, that, hey, I know you spend a lot of money on us and this facility is expensive, etc. Here's what I did this year. We brought in this amount of money. Because there's no guarantee those kids are going to be at that school if you don't have track. Trust me. That's where I thought it was a mistake that this Kentucky Wesleyan dropped track and field, because the enrollment, I said they've got some issues, they've got enrollment dropping. But what sport are you going to have a better shot of having 100, 150, maybe full tuition paying kids than you are for track and field? Like it's an amazing sport for that. So
yeah.
All right, I'll get off my soapbox here. Okay, so you talked about that you certainly, I don't want to necessarily put words in your mouth and say you were running away from coaching, but you certainly weren't running towards coaching.
Towards it,
for valid, I mean, it makes a lot of sense the way you're putting it. And then you start working at the Rochester. And so what was that first day like? Like, so here's 10, 20, however many kids you had in front of you, and they're looking at you and they know who you are. They all know, like, oh, this guy's a stud quarter miler. All right, this guy, he's an amazing coach because, he was awesome athlete. And it's like, I don't really, I know how I was coached, but I don't really know how to coach here necessarily. What was that first day when those kids are just looking at you? What was that like?
That exactly is what I told him too. So I remember just going to him and saying, "Listen, guys, you're new, I'm new. This is basically my first gig. I know how to run fast. I don't know how to coach it. But if you just trust me, I will learn it." And so for me, it was just getting them to buy in. I told them, I said, I know it worked. And I think too, just because my last 2 years of just training myself, I was almost starting to coach. Basically, I was coaching myself. So I was just starting to implement things that way. And then of course I had Cedric there, and then I had Coach Hart. And so when I actually got into the coaching part, I talked to Coach Hart quite a bit. He was always open to phone calls for me to call him. So I kind of sat down and said, "Hey, this is what I'm thinking about doing." And I said, "They're not." I mean, I think at the time my best quarter miler guy was like 50, like 51, 52 seconds. So for me, it was just trying to basically almost dummy down what I did at Baylor. So a lot of the training, a lot of the philosophy was from Coach Hart, and then I started putting my spin on it once I started getting a little bit more comfortable and with them. But I think the biggest thing was the buy-in. My job was to, I just told him, I said, if you just listen to me, I said, I'll try to make you faster. And then those two for D3, those kids are there because they love it. You know, they're not on scholarship, they're not on athletic scholarship or anything. So they just bought into it. And so that first day, I think we ran probably some 200s like we did at Baylor. And then I kind of made adjustments as we went along. And I think we had like a inter squad meet and they looked really good. And I was like, you know what, this might work. And they just started getting better and better, and I could see their confidence getting more. And now it's ironic. The one of my first guys, Sam Albert, he was a 400 hurler for me. Now he's the head coach at University of Rochester.
Is that right? Oh, that's so
Yeah,
cool.
yeah,
Oh, wow. I
yeah.
love
So
that. That's
yeah,
awesome.
so I always that first group of guys, they'll always be special to me. We still communicate to this day. But Sam ended up coaching, and so when I do get a chance to go to Rochester, I'll come up there. They actually invited me up there this year, but I think it was during we had a meet. They were hosting the conference championships up there. They were inviting back their former coaches.
Mhm.
So I wish I would have made it, but I talk to Sam probably at least once a month.
That's so cool. I love
Yeah.
that. That's really cool. What you've had some amazing, Cedric Walker is amazing, obviously Coach Hart is amazing, so you've had some really awesome mentors along the way. When you were kind of finding your groove of how to coach, and like you said, as I'm starting to learn and have experience, and I start putting a little bit of tweaks and experimenting on what might work and what might not work, what was the best piece of advice you got as you started going into the realm of coaching?
I think one of them was just there's there's nothing new.
Hmm.
That was one of the big things that Coach Hart told me. He was just like, there's nothing new. Cause like sometimes you'll talk to a coach and they don't want to share information. It's like a secret. I'm like, they've been running track for centuries. And so why don't you want to share? And so, but they also told me to keep it simple.
Hmm.
That was probably my biggest thing. Just keep it simple. And just your understand your program, understand what you're doing, because everybody does different things or the same thing. But long as a coach, long as you understand it, what you're doing, then it doesn't matter what other people think. And so for me, it was always okay. Do you have to always do 200s on Monday? Do you always have to do this on Tuesday? And it was like, no, it's you write your program based on your athletes too. And so for me, it was always let's coach the athlete, not the event. And so that's what I've been doing for the last 20 years is coaching the athlete and not the event. I think there's things that every coach does for the 100, for the 200, for the 400. Um, but trying to figure out that particular athlete is probably the key. So I always tell people 85% of what I do, everybody's going to do it. And then that 15%, I'm going to say, hey, Mike doesn't like to run long stuff. So Mike, we're going to do the short stuff for you. But David Hodge may want to do the longer stuff. So, hey, Dave, you're going to do that. And I think at the end of the day, as long as they're both being successful, to me, that's all that matters. I just remember when Trayvon Burmell he ran a windy 9.7 something at conference one year. And I had another guy that ran 9.9 in the same race. Everybody talked about Trayvon, but the other kid ran fast too. And they were totally different training. The only thing they did together maybe were block starts. That was it. The other kid, he was more of a 2.4 guy that ran 100, but he was on a 4x4, and he would do the longer stuff. Trayvon didn't like doing the longer stuff, so we never did it, at least that first year. And people were like, "Well, you got two guys that ran under 10." Yeah, but they weren't doing the same workouts, and so it was like you got to just train. I think you train the athlete, not the event.
So this is a good place to unpin that where I said pin it. You're talking about, you said coach the person over the event. How did you this better than anybody, Mike. I am on Twitter. I can't even say every day, all the time. I'm on Twitter all the time. It's where I live, right? And so I get to kind of be the fly on the wall for a lot of coaching conversations. I'm more interested because of my current background and passions on the, how do we help the person who chooses to be a track coach be a better person, mental health, physical health, relational health, financial health, etc. I'm less interested in the, how do I train a quarter miler
right,
and things like that. But it does feel like a lot of coaches go into one vein or the other. They either become I am going to be the best X's and O's coach ever. I'm going to go super deep into the 100 or super deep into the hammer throw. And there's certainly combinations or they're going to go into, I am going to have these kids believe in me because I'm going to believe in them. If I tell them, they're going to believe in me so much that if I tell them if they ran through that brick wall, they'd be faster, there would be no response. They would just be going, right? So how did you, when you're first starting coaching, because you have a lot of choices today, but there's a lot of factors pushing on you. Hey, you should coach this way. Or, hey, my high school coach, we used to do X, Y, and Z. So there's a lot of X's and O's coming at you. How did you decide early that, hey, and you came out of a pretty famous training program as well. I mean, there's articles written and books written. That's
right.
Not for every school has that, right? So how did you early on adopt the stance of, hey, it's going to be the people first, what they need, not what I think the regiment of the event is supposed to be?
Right. Well, I think just because of the coaches I've had, they always were concerned about my well-being before the sport. And so Cedric was like a second dad to me. So, he would pick me up. His daughter is my goddaughter. It's just things like that. Coach Hart's the same way. Like Coach Hart, even to this day, still comes out, and a lot of times we don't even talk about track. We just talk about life. And then I talked to Coach Holloway Mouse at Florida. We talk probably every 2 weeks, and so he's one of my mentors. And so we're always just saying we got to treat the person first, because I think if the kids believe in you, that you care about them as a person, like you said, they'll run through a big raw for it because they know that you got their back. And so my thing is, I'm gonna make sure that I build a trust with them, and then and we're gonna have some fun. But I'm still gonna demand a lot from them. But at the same time, they got to know that I trust that they can trust me with anything. And so we always talk about that. Like even every day, like now we sit around and pray before practice, ask about any concerns, just because I think if they know that you care about them, it's easy for them to do the drag part. It's so much easier.
Yeah, I keep thinking Oh, I keep threatening that I'm going to have a little button for anytime someone mentions a Gill podcast alum. You mentioned the great Mouse, who was I call him an OG Gill podcast. He was like guest number 30. I'm so humbled and in love with that man that he trusted me so early in this process. We're at episode 250, Mike. It's easy for you to trust me that this is a safe place to be. Mouse was like, no one was doing podcasts back then. He's like, Mike, what you doing, man? So
Right.
shout out to Mouse, man. Love him to death. In
Yeah,
fact,
because even with him, like last year because last year was my second year as being a head coach, and after I got the job, I actually called him and I said, Miles, I want to learn from the best. Like you've won, man, like a million championships, and how did you do it? And he said, Mike, anytime you want to come down, let me know. And so my first year, it was crazy because I was like living through a water, like a fire hydrant, trying to figure out things. But then last year, I went down there for like 3 days and just spent time with him every morning, watch practice, and he's so laid back, but you could generally see how he cares about his coaches and his student athletes. And we didn't really talk about X's and O's either. We just talked about how can we be more successful as men, um, and help each other. And so that was probably the best 2.5 days that I spent last year.
We need to normalize that. Like, you got such a boost in your head coaching career because you were able to go down and see what a Mouse does. Like how you say he's laid back. He's a laid back, intense guy. That's how I would describe him. But instead of having to go through these last 2 to 3 years and make the mistakes that you make, and certainly you still make mistakes. You're human, right? But going down and being able to shadow a guy like Mouse enabled you to not make a lot of mistakes either. So your athletes are better off for that. We need to normalize that kind of stuff, whether it's, going to an institution and modeling. And by the way, it's not always Mouse, by the way. It's not Mouse just because he's won a million championships and he's at Division I and SEC and all this kind of stuff. There are amazing, like super amazing coaches for you to model and shadow on the Division II level, the junior. In fact, you want to learn how to do more with less, go find, and there are plenty of them, the amazing coaches on the junior college route. Go find them and shadow what they do, because they're getting a ton out of very little resources. High school level, same thing. We got to normalize that kind of professional development. So I love that you had that opportunity.
Yeah, I think coaches, sometimes they're just afraid to pick up a phone and call somebody 100%. And say, hey, can I come down and shadow you for a couple of days? And I don't have a problem with that. Like earlier in the fall, I wanted to go down and see Edric, and they're an hour and a half away, or Coach Henry down at A&M, or there's so many great coaches out there, and you just want to hey, there's so many different ways to do it, and be successful.
I'm glad you said that. That's actually kind of our two main goals here on the podcast. The reason we started this 4 or 5 seasons ago now, still crazy, I can't wrap my head around that, was to uplift and honor coaches around the country. What you do is immeasurable, the positive impact you make on young people. So I wanted an avenue to just kind of uplift and honor and really kind of put you on the pedestal, the rock star that you are, and give you the shout out that you deserve. That's one goal. The other goal is to provide as immense value as we can to those who listen, right? And so one of those ways, one of those sub goals that, I don't know that I've ever said this actually on record. And I always, whenever I tell people this, I always use Mouse as my example. I go, I want the podcast to bring down a Mouse. Now that sounds terrible. Right. What I mean by that is, to what you just said there are people who are afraid to go to shoot an email to Mouse, to when they see him, when he's not coaching at a meet, to go introduce themselves, or at convention, because he's Mouse, Hey, Mike, this may be, I don't know, you may be hearing this for the first time. You're that way now too. I guarantee you, because you're the head coach of Baylor, that now there are people that would go, man, I'd really like to ask Mike how he does X, Y, and Z, but man, he's the head coach of Baylor. He ain't gonna talk to me. He's big time. You know what I'm saying? I know you're not. I know you're not like that, because you would welcome anybody to come talk to you. But I'm saying, because we have this image of the school that's on your chest, or an athletic accolade or championship that you've won, that we can't. So I wanted to show people that Mike Ford and Mike Holloway and Carol Smith Gilberts and Edric Florials and Lonnie Greens, that, you know what, the proverbial, you wake up every morning and put your pants on just like everybody else, that you are humans first. And I'm willing to bet that anybody who is quote unquote worthy of being shadowed, they got that way because they are open to talking to other humans. You know what I'm saying?
So no, it's so true. I mean, I remember when I first met Mouse, I mean, this is years ago. I remember Cedric, of course, he was kind of our connection, but I was in Florida for something, and Mouse said, "Hey," and at the time I wasn't calling him Mouse, I was calling him Coach Holloway. He said, "Come by the house," and I said, "Okay," and ring the doorbell, and his wife,
Angel,
and she says, "Mike, what are you doing here?" And I didn't realize we ran in high school at a couple of meets together, and he was like, "Yeah."
No.
So so she's like running through the house, and she's like, "Hey," and Mouse was like, "What's going on?" She said, "Me and Mike." So at Simplot games, and then they had what else? It was a Keebler back then.
Yeah, the IPI here in
And so she has this picture of me and her at Simplot. I got MVP of the meet for the males, and then she got it for the females, and we had a picture together. And so she's like, "Oh, I've known him for," and I think we did like maybe one or two visits together on our senior year. So it was kind of cool.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
small world stuff there,
Yeah. And
man.
so
Holy cow.
we literally met then. That's when I first met Mouse. And then ever since then I said, "Hey, would you be willing to have me," even when I was an assistant coach, he said, "Hey, anytime you want to talk or anything, let me know." And then of course in the summertime, if I was overseas and we saw each other, we would talk then too. So, and that's what we've been doing since then. So he's definitely, I would definitely put him in my top five of all time people. But he's just a good man too.
Yep.
So I'm always like I tell some coaches, um, we need to promote our better coaches more, and we don't want, but we don't. And so for me, as always, if I could give him a shout out, like his birthday was yesterday, so I'm always thinking about that too. So things like that.
Amen. Amen. And look, you know, we could tell lots of great stories about Mouse. He's had his episode, so we're going to keep moving forward. I know you probably listen to Mouse. I love you, man. You know, you get everything you deserve. That's for sure. And you deserve more, my friend. Let's switch gears here a little bit. You know, recently on before we get into the Baylor side of you coming back to Baylor side for coaching, recently I'd like to get your opinion on this, because you mentioned this with Trayvon and then your other athlete, and the differences that they had in their style of training, and then therefore the events that you put them in and didn't put them in. Recently on Twitter, someone said, I love definitives because I love busting definitives. The statement was, no big school, so I think this person was talking about Power Fives, no Power Five school is going to recruit just a 100-meter runner. You better be ready to also run the 4x4. It's a guarantee. And I love definitives. It's a guarantee because I love busting these things.
Yeah.
And I think what they were getting at was, with as few scholarships as we have, and, you need to maximize every point you can get from every dollar that you spend, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But you mentioned Trayvon, who was a great 100-meter, 200-meter guy. Maybe I just missed it. I don't pay attention to all of it. I don't remember him being on any 4x4 teams. Talk to me about, again, we don't get X's and O's. So we don't need to talk about that, but talk about philosophy of, do all 100-meter men and women have to run the 4x4, and why or why not?
No, I don't think so. I mean, Trayvon actually only ran one. He ran one indoor one his sophomore year, just because he wanted to do it. I always say like the money we invest. I mean, Baylor is 75,000 a year, so the scholarship here is definitely we definitely want to maximize that. And so, I mean, most of my big scholarship kids, they're probably doing two events, maybe three. I mean, I have some that they're doing four, um, but I also realize sometimes it's a maturation period too. So like with Trayvon, his freshman year, we didn't run a lot of 200s. We mostly ran the 100, some 4x1s, and then maybe at the conference meet run the 200. And then but the next year we sat down after he won NCAA's, and I said, hey, what are your goals for next year? I want to win NCs again in 100. And I said, how about we try to be the best sprinter possible? He said, Coach, what do you mean by that? And I said, think about Usain Bolt, think about even Carl Lewis, think about all the great Tyson Gaze, Justin Gatlin. They all ran the one and the two. I said, that to me is, he said, and so he was like, okay, Coach. He said, I'm what do I need to do though? And I said, you have to do the things that you don't like to do. And he said, what, the over distance stuff? I was like, yep. So for him, that was a change. And so even his senior year, I mean, he won indoor. He won the indoor 200. He got second in 100 to DeGrasse that year in the 100, but he ran a windy 1980, 1986, like with a 2.1. He ran a wind legal 2003, but he just embraced doing a little bit of the longer workouts. But also thought it helped him get through more of the rounds too. So even though the long college season so much, he was able to get through NCAA's, the first round of the nationals, NCAA's, and then he went to USA's. He went through the three rounds at NCAA's. I mean, USA championships, made the world team that year, and he got third at Worlds that year. And then people were just like, man, he ran a lot. Yeah, he did, but he was in shape to do it. And so he just had a really good base. And so our big thing is trying to get him as fit as possible to run. But I think kids nowadays, you have to double. I mean, I look at it, there's a lot of good. I mean, Grant Holloway, he was running the 60 hurdles indoor, 4x4. I mean, he was a long jumper, high jumper. I mean, I don't think he high jumped it at Florida, but he long jumped. I mean, and then eventually he was like, you know what, we're just going to stick with the hurdles. But I mean, I think nowadays kids uh, they're good. And it's like, you only get them for that amount of time. You don't get them that long. I mean, Trayvon was only here 2 years. Jeremy Warner was only here 2 years. So you want to get as much as you can out of them. But I think nowadays, to win the team titles, you're gonna have to use your better people. And so I definitely would disagree that if you're a 100-meter person, you got to run a 4x4. But I think you got to do other stuff besides the 100. You got to probably run the 200. This maybe score points at conference. Because that's kind of the name of the game now, is trying to make sure you maximize the conference meets and then trying to qualify people for nationals.
Yeah, and I think some people use it as like a scare tactic sometimes too, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they look at a kid and say, hey, if you want to go to Baylor, they're going to make you run the 1, the 2, and the 4, and that might be true, but it certainly is not true that you're going to run the 100, 200, and 400 every single meet.
Right.
When I coached at Ball State, we had a terrific long jumper. She was like 22 mid and 44, 45 feet.
Okay.
It was a stud, sprinter. Well, I mean, you're not going to jump that far and not be good, right?
Right.
But we needed her in the 4x4. Like she was, she also split 52, but she she would not have been good at Baylor. She hated the 400, right? So we just set a promise. We said, okay, hey, no problem. We need you for 2 4x4s a year, the indoor conference and the outdoor conference.
Yeah.
And we just trained her as a long jumper, triple jumper.
Yeah.
And so at conference, she'd run at indoor. She ran the 6, the 2, the long, the triple, and the 4x4. We didn't have all these different heats like you guys are doing in New York. That's crazy. And then outdoor, same thing: 1, 2, 4x1, 4x4, long and triple. Because in the long and the triple, she could take like 1 or 2 jumps. So
yeah.
wasn't like even an event. But I remember it was interesting. We literally just trained her as a short sprinter, long jumper, and because I knew she'd be able to make one round around the track.
Yeah.
400 meter training to me is more about not running one 400 meter fast. It's like, oh, well, a 400 meter runner is going to run a 400 and a 4x4. So then you're going to be able to, recover faster and things like that. And if you're going to do rounds, et cetera. So we never worried about.
Oh yeah. Cause you can do it for one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what was interesting is as we got closer to conference, both times she'd come up to me, and this is a person who hated the 400 4x4. Hey, can I do a 400 meter workout? Just so I'm prepared. And, which is funny because it's like, what is one
workout going to do?
It's not doing anything, but it did do a lot, right? She felt more mentally. Yeah. So we do. I don't even remember what we do. I'd probably say, yeah, what do you want to do? And she'd be like, a 500. Cool. To go do one 500. That's not going to hurt you. Yeah, well, it's not going to help you either, but whatever. But but that's where I think people, it's like they try to, there's some fear mongering there of like, yeah, you got to run the 400. And it's like, yeah, you might at conference and, maybe a one-off at Texas Relays or whatever, but it's not every single, your 100 meter short sprinter specialist or a long jumper specialist. That doesn't mean you don't do other events. So anyway, just wanted to get
you. And then sometimes you find out that you're actually good at it. And that's then you might move up. Yeah.
Which is you were a long jumper. You were a jumper. Yeah. And then it's like, hey, we need you, guy got hurt. We need you to run. It's like, hey man, you're at 50 point. That's not bad for a freshman, man. Let's maybe keep exploring that. And if you'd only stayed as that long jumper, gosh, we might be having a completely different conversation or not at all with you, Mike Ford.
Exactly.
Okay. Let's talk about, I was interested earlier about how you go from high school in upstate New York to Waco, Texas for college. You go back home. That's a big deal for a lot of people, going back home. And then you go back second home. You go back to college home. You go back to Baylor. Coach Hart calls you up and says, hey, we have an assistant job available for you here. What was that like? You spent what, 3-4 years back up in Rochester?
Yeah, 3 years.
So you've been gone 3 years. That's a lifetime, for a lot of places. You come back on campus, and now you're not coming back on campus as athlete Mike. You're coming back as Coach Ford. What was that like, stepping back into your alma mater and coaching under? Not only coaching under the coach that coached you, but Coach Hart is this big figure. This ain't just, this is dad for a lot of people.
Right.
What was that like, stepping into that role?
Oh man, it was, I would say this. I know we've gotten rid of the volunteer coaches, and we got to pay every coach now. And I'm not gonna say I was an advocate of that. But I remember basically my first 4 years at Baylor, I didn't coach anything. I just learned from him. And I think that was probably the best thing that ever happened for my career. Because I was able to, I always say it's different when you're the person not writing the workouts and you can see things, and then you get thrown into it. When you're the one that's writing the workout, we're writing the program. And so for me to be able to study under him, learn, I always say, I don't know if Coach Hart was a good X's and O's person, but I know he was a really good manager. He could manage his season. He knew the peaks, the valleys. We never talked about peaking. He would always, even when I was running, even when I started coaching with him, we always had our kids ready to run at the right time. And so for me, those first 4 years, literally all I did was recruit. I held a stopwatch. I asked questions. And I just kind of shadowed, basically I shadowed him. And then my office was right next door to him. So we would have those moments where we sat down and talked and just about training philosophy and things like that. But I think the biggest, when I knew that I was ready to coach was when we went to the Olympics in Athens. We went to the USA had a training camp in Creed, and right before we went, he said, Mike, I want you to write down the next 10 days of workouts for Jeremy Warner and Darrell Williamson. And so literally I'm like, oh my God, am I going to be the one coaching them? And so I'm writing the workouts down, and I write them down. I give them to him, and he gives me his. Literally,
the
workouts were about 99% the same.
Dude, how good did that make you feel?
Yeah. And so,
I mean,
yeah,
because let's play the other scenario. You give them your 10 and it's like night and day, and you're just like, oh my God, maybe I know nothing. Like, what? I
right.
have been soaking up nothing.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So like we would, if he was doing 200s, he might have said like 26 pace. I might have had like 25.5 or something like that. But everything else was like when the rest periods and all this stuff. And so that gave me a lot more confidence that I kind of knew what I was doing. And so when we got back, he was able to, if he had to go recruit or if he had to do a podcast or if he had to do whatever, he would let me, hey, Mike, you got to work out, you know what to do. And so, but I also think that those 4 years helped me tremendously to learn from him, you know, and then actually kind of put my spin on things. And so I was always appreciative of that. Just him letting me like go. I mean, my first one of my first trips overseas was the Athens Olympics. And so it was a great opportunity for me. So I always will be appreciative of him for that.
You know, there's certain coaches that, I don't know, they transcend what coaching is, and it's rare. I mean, all coaches are amazing, but through legacy and through character, you know, they're oversized, outreached on their campus, their program.
Mm-hmm.
Um, maybe a better way of putting it is, not many coaches are going to get a statue of them at their track, right?
Right.
So what was it like? You know, Coach Hart was such a big part of the program, and then he retires. Like we all, but by the way, I don't look at retiring as a bad thing. I know we get very in our feelings because it's like, oh, I'm not going to be around that person. It's actually kind of selfish because it's like, oh, I'm not going to be around that person. But we all you coaches, we all deserve to retire one day and spend even more time with your friends and family, passions and charities. So he goes to retire. I mean, was there like a day of mourning when it was officially announced? I mean, what's that like when a Coach Hart retires?
Yeah. It's just it was it was what was it? It was a study. We kind of knew that he was going to retire. You know, I know he wanted to make sure. I know Will London the third. He wanted to see him finish up his 4 years, and so he decided to retire right after his last year. So we knew it was coming. It was just different because, like I said, for 18 maybe 18 years my office was right next to his. And so me coming into the office now, well, then when he retired, there was no one there. So I knew at 12 o'clock he was going to take a nap and I knew that door was going to close. And at 1 o'clock, he would open up a Dr. Pepper after he woke up from his nap. So it was just different because I didn't have that person there anymore. But and then two, he wasn't coming around a lot. You know, sometimes they retire and they still want to come around, and he didn't do that. And then eventually he started coming back through because I think he was missing track. Even now, when I became a head coach, he wasn't around much, and then lately he's like, "Hey, you're doing a great job. Do you like?" He asked me, "Do I mind him coming to the track?" And I'm like, "Your name is on the complex. Like, how can I keep you away from here?" And so it's good. I mean, I get to see him. Like I said, I saw him a couple of days ago. I'll see him next week. We have a Hall of Fame. Got three inductees getting in the Hall of Fame at Baylor, so I'll see him there. But it's just for me to be able to still talk to him because eventually those talks won't happen, you know. So I'm always mindful of having those opportunities to continue to talk to him. And so but then also felt the burden of now I got to be the one that coaches a quarter at Baylor. So that was for me was a little. Hey, I might change up some things in training. And But the year I started coaching the quarter was COVID, so I didn't get a chance to do a whole bunch. Yeah, and finally now everything is kind of just shaping in, and so Coach Hart has been real pleased with it.
What, you know, Baylor is really one of the unique programs in regards to a lot of loyalty. What I mean by that is, you're an alum who's back and now the head coach. A good friend, Danny Brabham, was there for a long time. Good friend, Todd Harbert, was there for a long time and became the head coach as well, and a Baylor alum. How was that? A lot of times when a program's coach retires or leaves, there's a lot of uncertainty amongst the assistant coaches. As that was going through, and kind of double for you because Coach Hart and then also Coach Harbor, how was it for you? Was there ever any uncertainty of like, oh, I better make sure? I almost said your resume is punched up, but you probably didn't even have a resume. You're probably like, well, man, do I need to get a resume? Do I need to worry about another job? Or
Yeah.
how was that process for you professionally?
I think the first one when Coach Hart retired and Coach Harbor took over, it was we kind of knew who was going to be the new head coach. We kind of knew it was either going to be Coach Harbor, or it was going to be Coach Brabham, because those are the only two that, as far as I know, that applied for it. So we knew it was going to stay in-house. I think with my position, it was different because I think our administrators, they wanted something different. And so I know they did a search. But I was at least on one of the candidates for the job too. That was a little bit uncertainty because I think for us, we didn't know if our AD wanted to hire within, or did he want to just go ahead and blow it up and start it all over again. But we had probably 2 interviews, a couple of Zoom calls about the program and what the vision was for me in the program. I think he just wanted something different. Um, and But it just worked out. And so for me, I thought it was a lifetime. Like, man, when are they gonna make this decision? But it was probably like 6 weeks. But I knew it was more probably. It was weird. I wasn't really concerned about myself. I felt that I could get a job somewhere else if I needed to. But I knew if I did know this, if someone else took the job, that I wasn't going to stay. Just because I wouldn't want to work for a job I applied for and work for that person. And no disrespect to whoever would have got it, but I just would have worked for them. And I think with my staff, I was more concerned about the staff because I didn't know where they would go. And I guess I shouldn't need to be concerned about them, but some of them have kids and things like that. And so I was more concerned about what would they do. Um, um, and so I was already like, maybe I need to already start looking for another job. So I was already kind of thinking like that. But and then it all worked out. I knew everything was in God's plan. So it just worked out that way.
It's funny that you said it felt like it took eternity because, you and I were messaging each other during
Yeah.
this, and I felt from the outside it was an eternity. I was like, when are these guys going to make the right decision? Let's get this going. I remember messaging that. I was like, come on, they know the right decision. Let's get this done with.
Yeah.
So I couldn't imagine being in your shoes because, like I said, I thought it took forever. And, you were in the muck with it. So,
Yeah,
so,
no, I think the last, right before I think I did my last interview, I came in the office one day. It was like on the weekend, and I literally cleaned my office out. My other office, I cleaned it out and I boxed everything up, put it in my car, and I think Coach Harper, he was still here, and he looked in, and then I guess for some reason he got a phone call from the AD, and he said, "Oh," he said, "I thought you said the conversation went well with Mike." He said, "Well, his office is cleaned out." And so Coach called me. He said, "Hey, Mike, what's going on?" I said, "Two things are going to happen." I said, "I'm going to move down to the bigger office in a couple of weeks, or I'm going to be looking for another." Yeah, I'm out. And so, yeah, and the AD called me, said, "Everything good?" I'm like, "Yeah, no, we're good." I said, "I'm just, I want to make sure that I'm prepared to whatever happens, and I think I was at peace with everything too. And so I said, I'm a big belief that when God closes a door, he'll open another one. And so for me, he'll open another door for me. It's kind of like me being a head coach. He closed that door of me being an assistant coach, who, like, for me, I love being an assistant coach. I could be at the track all day, and that actually took me a long time to get used to not doing that anymore. And so I had to basically kill off the assistant coach Mike to be the head coach Mike. So it took a little time because I was so used to being at the track all day, you know.
Well, we're gonna get into that part for sure, because I'm always fascinated by that, because people think they want the job, but they don't know what the job is. And some of that is, and I'm not saying in this situation, but some of that is the detriment of our assistant coaches, that our head coaches are not training our assistant coaches to be future head coaches. And so you just think you know what the head coach is doing until you actually sit in that chair. So we'll pause real quick on that, because before that, I want to know, I have a special place in my heart for alums who coach at their alma mater. And so you're doing it already as the assistant. What was it like, though? Because again, God bless every assistant coach out there, but the head coach, it's a different title for a reason. What was it like when you got the call, or they told you in person of, hey, Mike, we've wisened up and we've made the right decision? Those are my words, Mr. ED, if you're listening, I'm sorry. What was it like when it was, final, hey, you are going to be the next head coach of Baylor University?
It was definitely a relief. I think the hardest part for me was, honestly, I my my assistant coaches, I didn't, you don't really talk to them. Like, we talk, but we don't talk. And so for me, it was interviewing. Basically, I interviewed them all over again, just to see like what they believed in, like, kind of like what's their passion about coaching, things like that, because I never knew. I just assumed, hey, we're working together. My job as an assistant coach is to make my head coach look good, make him look better. And so for me, it was just trying to get to know them more. And then I think just the meetings, Baylor has a lot of meetings. And so getting used to that, and then maybe not being at the track as much. And then having trust in my assistant coaches, that when I'm not here, because I'm not saying I'm not not a micromanager, but I like to, when I'm at practice, I want to be at practice. I'm still writing all my workouts, things like that, and I want to be there for them when they're training. And I hate missing practice, but as a head coach, you have other obligations that you need to do, and sometimes it may fall during practice time. And so I had to get used to that. And then two, I just had to make sure that I had to make sure that I had time for myself too. And it was things that I saw, like, we used to always meet with Coach Hart and even Coach Harbor. We used to meet every Monday for a staff meeting. And I was just like, and I used to hate staff meetings. I'm not a big meeting person, but I'm always saying, when you meet, you should meet and get stuff done at those meetings. But I also thought that maybe not having meetings on Monday, but moving them to Tuesday. And people were like, why? And I said, well, when you're coming off of a track meet, when you're gone Friday, Saturday, you're coming back Sunday. I said, for people who have wives and families, they're not spending a lot of time with them. And so I said, if you want to drive your kids to work, or to school, or you want to spend the day with your wife in the morning, then you can come in for practice on Monday. Then two, when we come from a track meet, if we have any kids that have been injured, we don't know anything until Tuesday anyway. So then it'll give us a day to kind of decompress a little bit. So now we meet on Tuesday. And so it was little things like that. And then like my staff, I give them a day off during the week. I'm like, yeah, you figure it out, like figure out which day. So if you got to do things at the house, or you got errands, whatever, that's your day. And then, like, for me, like, Sunday's my day, where if we don't have recruits in, that's my day to reflect on the week before, and then the upcoming week. And so, before I can be refreshed, because I think as coaches, sometimes we try to burn the candle, and we always say we got to keep grinding, and we're going to grind into the ground. And so for me, it's just like making sure that I'm fresh, and I'm present. I'm present at practice and in my meetings too.
You hear about the burning the candle on both ends, as you're alluding to. Some of us have both those sides of that candle burning, and also another flame right in the middle of it too.
Right.
And unfortunately, some of us would take that picture and put it as a badge of honor as well, and it's not. Again, I know we do it for the kids, but it is a job first, which means when you look at your priority list, your job for 99.999% of us in this world should not be number one. Maybe your faith, maybe your family, yourself. And I know that's hard sometimes for a coach to be the selfish side of it, being, hey, I got to take care of my mental health. I got to take care of my physical health, et cetera. But if you don't do that, well, you're not going to be around to help the very people that you want to help out on that track and in life in general. So one of my absolute favorite question for a coach when he becomes a head coach for the first time. And it might be, this is fairly unique. You were so how many years were you at Baylor as a coach, not an athlete, as a coach before you became a head coach?
Maybe like 18 years.
Yeah. So I'm from Alabama, so we're just going to round that up and say 20. Okay. We like easy math here. So so maybe unique because you were at the institution for 20 years and had very trusting, Coach Hart and Coach Harbor, amazing men. But I'm always curious. So when you become the head coach, and after a year or two, you're getting in your own groove. I love how conscientious you were about. I know you said it was a little thing, but the little things all add up to big things. I love I love the moving the meeting to Tuesday, because everybody has it on Monday, by the way.
Yeah.
And to your exact point, you're just coming off of a meet or whatever. If you have anybody who's in the training room, you don't know nothing Monday morning anyway to prepare for the next weekend's meet. So super, super smart and conscientious. I love that. I'd be interested in how many coaches meet on Monday mornings versus another day or Monday afternoon or something.
Right.
That's really keen. I love that. So my question, Mike, now you kind of look back and you're still getting your groove on. Every year you're continuing to get better as a head coach. But what did you find when you became the head coach? What activity, because there's a lot of activities, recruiting, fundraising, budgeting, staffing evaluations, recruiting evaluations, et cetera. What did you think was going to be really hard for you that you thought, oh, I don't really know how to do maybe X, Y, and Z, so I might struggle there, but it actually was like, oh, this is a lot easier than I thought?
Man, let's see. I think it was more so the staffing. I think, well, no, I take that back. That's probably been my hardest thing. But the budgeting was easy just because of my business background. I think for me, the hardest part, I'll change the question, but the hardest part for me was delegating stuff to do. Because I was so used to doing so much stuff between community service engagements, a little bit of the academic stuff with the team, where I had to give some of that up. But then I'm on the emails and I'm like responding before the coach is responding to it. But I think the recruiting part now is a little harder, just because of the unlimited visits now that kids do have. And so you don't know if the kid is really genuine about coming in because they want to come in because of the school, or they just want to take an extra free visit. And so I think that part is hard. And I think the biggest thing for me is just trying to get the staff on the same page on how we do things. But I don't think there was anything hard. I think it was just me learning to adjust to the meetings that weren't track related. And so, and sometimes it wasn't me calling a meeting, it was somebody else calling a meeting. And so it just trying to make sure that I'm present when I'm in those meetings. I think that was probably the hardest. That's probably the hardest. But everything else kind of just flowed with it. I think if you have a good staff, it makes it a little easier. So now I don't have to worry about certain things on our staff. They just handle it, and I know they handle it. I don't have to be like, let me double check to see if they did it. But I think the recruiting part, which I thought was easy, just because I love people. And so I love meeting people, but I think now it's just a little harder just because you're hoping to get one kid, but you probably got to recruit 10 to get the one, just because of all because the NCAA allows kids to take unlimited visits. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of topics there with the transfer portal and NIL and the unlimited visits, the additional coaches as well. There's a lot that, well, I tell you what, I retired from college coaching 18 years ago. And let me tell you what, it might as well have been 180 years ago, because it is so different. And Can't say that I've looked back, to be honest with you. But Mike, to wrap us up here today, man, what's got you excited as you look forward to 2024 and maybe even, a guy like you who has, cast visions, maybe you're even thinking about 25, 26, 2030 for crying out loud. What's got you excited about Baylor track and field and under your tutelage?
Well, I'm looking forward to the Big 12 meet. That was when we got the bid for it, and then we're like, okay, we got this older track. Our track was we put it in 2014, and we got some testing done on it. And they said, hey, it's still good for about maybe 2 more years. And but then our AD and our administrators said, you know what, we're hosting Big 12. We're going to get it resurfaced this year. So I'm definitely grateful to Mac Rhodes for having that vision of let's get a new track put in, and our alum that put money into it. So I'm looking forward to the Big 12 championship, of course. I'm looking forward to the team. I think our team we have a lot of vets, and so I'm looking forward to we did well last year, and now we're just trying to take another step into that direction. And so I think if we hit correctly, we could be a top 10 team during the outdoor season. And of course, I'm looking forward to the Paris Olympics. I'm looking forward to that, and I think that's it. I'm looking forward to the coaches that I talk to on a regular, just seeing how, even though some of the events that we butt heads in, I just want them to be successful too. So I'm just looking forward to that. And then listening to you all the time. I mean, last year 2 years ago, you introduced me at a track clinic. So and then also we're hosting a track clinic. They're hosting a track clinic from Texas High School is in Waco this year. And so I'm looking forward to that in January.
And I will be in Hawaii.
Hey, that's a little better though.
I was gonna, Stu called me up. Was like, hey man, can you host again? And I love doing that. Again, anytime that I get to be on a stage or on a microphone and I'm uplifting another coach, man, come on, that's my dream. I have my dream job here, to be honest with you. And I saw it was in Waco, and I was like, oh, that's cool. And I've been to that hotel. I've been there for Texas AD clinic, high school clinics and stuff like that. And then my wife said, hey, I found the right deal for us to go to Hawaii. And I was like, man, that sucks, guys. I'll see y'all in 2025.
Hey, I would take the Hawaii trip too if I was you. Yeah, but no, I'm looking forward to that just because Daryl Williamson is getting inducted to the Hall of Fame.
Oh, that's right.
And so I'm all that just one of my former athletes get inducted, and then two, we're gonna I talked to Stu about doing something different, and so we're actually gonna do, instead of going into, how we always just go into a room and we basically put a PowerPoint slides and all that stuff. We're actually going to do it at the track. So my vault coach is going to do a pole vault clinic at the facility. So Brandon's going to do pole vault. Brandon Richards, Coach Richards, going to do that. Coach Smith, she's going to do either a long jump or triple jump session on the track, and I'll do a sprint clinic on the track. And so when I talked to him about it, he said, you know what, we've never done that. We've always had coaches just come, put their PowerPoint and show it. And I said, I would love, one, I can show our facility off to the high school coaches, but then two, I can give them some hands-on tips of what we do and actually see it live. And so we're going to see how that goes. But hopefully it'll work out well. I think it will. I'm looking forward to it. I think I'm the first one on that Saturday to do it. So I'm looking forward to it.
I typically would say, hey, I'll be thinking of you. I probably won't. No, I'll be on the beach somewhere.
No, enjoy that for sure.
Absolutely. Well, Mike, man, thank you so much. I know how busy you are. In fact, it's the exact opposite. I don't know how busy you are. I just know that you're extremely busy. So anytime that, someone can sit down with us here for, 2 hours, it just means the world to me. Super excited about you and your development. I mean, it's so awesome to hear your journey and what you've done up to now, but now you are forging this head coach Mike Ford, and there's a lot of growth still to go there. And so I'm just super excited to be able to kind of be on the sidelines and watch it, man. It's very exciting. I'm very anxious to see your continued leadership on that program.
No, well, I appreciate you and everything that you do for track and field and for the coaches. We're definitely blessed to have you in our corner.
Thank you, man. That means a lot. And thank you for being here again as we start off. This is season 5. It's hard to even get those words out of my lips that we are going into season 5 here. We're going to have a lot of fun this month here. We're doing Baylor month, so you're going to have to check next week to see who the second leg of our Baylor 4x4 is here in January of 2024. And then don't forget April and May, right? March, April, May. Yep, April and May, we're going to have what I would deem a micro podcast, a 20-minute-ish podcast every day. We have a high school coach from every state in America, including Washington, D.C., talking about their outdoor state meet qualifying system. So check us out in April and May every day. It's going to be a great series. We're going to learn a lot. We're going to have a lot of conversation around what different states do around the country. So join us next week. We're going to go to the second leg of the 4x4. Thanks, everybody.